Listen, bitch, if you are here, you are not broken, your brain is not defective, and your past is not disqualifying. Your quirks are not your curse, okay? Like, we're meant to be weird on purpose. And the show exists because I am done watching people play small. I'm done watching people medicate their personality away or apologize for how God designed our brains, okay? Whether it runs like a Ferrari or a shopping cart with a crooked wheel. Okay. We learn to work with it, not against it. Okay. My neurospicy crew, you get that. You're not behind. You're not less. You are built different for a reason. God chose you with intention. Okay. And my mission is simple: step into your potential. Use your brain as a tool, not a mini prison, and then align your life with his plan instead of fighting every step of the way. And tonight I've got someone who walks in a space most people avoid like the plague, which is life, death, and leadership. Okay. We have Dr. Seth David Clark.
Ah,
He's a leadership scholar, executive coach, ordained Christian minister, and a former hospice chaplain. This is a man who has literally sat beside on the bedside of people dying, working with grief and meaning and mortality. And then he turned that experience into helping leaders live with clarity and courage instead of the fear and denial that tends to run us all. Um, he studies how remembering we're mortal doesn't make life darker. It actually makes it more intentional, more grounded, more alive. And he's not the doom guy. He's the wake up and live fully guy, which I feel like is going to be so much fun for the show because that's the whole point, right? So, Seth, thank you so much for your time and welcome to Listen, Bitch.
hey, Brandon, thanks for having me. And I love how you framed all that. And yeah, I'm also neurospicy. So let's go every which way today and see what happens.
Company. Squirrel brain is a real thing around here. So we're fine. The audience is used to that. Um, yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to hear your story.
Yeah. Well, let's start. Maybe not the very beginning, maybe not the creation of the world, but how I grew up, right? So I grew up in a very structured household, right? Where and very religious. I'm still, Christian. I'm actually a pastor, but the kind of Christianity I grew up in was also very structured, right, everything's wrong, nothing in between. And so I came up in that, and so part of that, was like this fear of death, right? Because like, oh, what if I didn't believe the right way or do the right thing? What comes after that, right? And so death became kind of a scary thing, right? And I think for all of us, death is scary, right? Because
Of course.
it's so strange, it's so weird, and at the very least, it's like, well, I don't know how that's going to happen, right? We don't know what it's going to look like, right? So for me, there was a lot of fear around that. And then, growing up, coming into my own in terms of my own beliefs and my own kind of ideas around what happens at death and after death. And then, especially starting to do ministry actually and starting to sit with those who are dying, whether in my role as pastor or for a while in the height of COVID, as a hospice chaplain, right? You start seeing that. I started seeing that, like what it means to die well, what it means to die in a way that isn't just a tragedy to you, but you have some agency and some ownership over it, right? And so then I, through reading and through experience, started thinking about what it means to, and here it is, befriend death. Right. The first time I heard that, I recoiled. Like, what does that mean? Like, death is the worst friend ever. Like, that's not a friend. Death is an enemy.
Right.
Right. And then little by little realizing, yes, death is the worst, and it's my choice, it's my power, and even out of my love that I can love this thing that is so terrible for us all, my own death.
Right. Well, I guess I love the fact that, I mean, Jesus is real.
Yeah.
So death, I think, especially if you have that relationship with him, it takes on a whole new meaning.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about all that perspective?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two things, right? So there's what happens as you prepare for your death, and then part of life too, especially if you come from like a faith perspective, like a Jesus perspective, like what about the after the death stuff, right? And so in my coaching work, the entry point is, what about leading towards the death, right? Because everyone has different understandings of what happens then and what happens after that, right? In my ministry, right, it's about more than just what happens then in between now and then. It's about what happens beyond, right? And so I think that at the very least, within like the more kind of coaching, business, consulting, all that stuff, right? It's more about excuse me, it's more about how to have death be a tool to find courage, right, in the face of change, but also to find clarity in terms of what you want to do with this life, right? But then for those of us like myself who think that life is about more than just what happens in this life, right? That the story of Christ means something and not just for what happens now, but beyond our dying breath. Then I think there's a world of impact there too, right?
Yeah.
Because if God is real, and I think so, then our fundamental relationship isn't with ourselves, isn't with our loved ones, isn't even with death and what we do with death, but it's with God. And so that's where that goes, right? And so there is not this like clean line, just like how dying is a process, right? There's not a clean line in
Right.
terms of my work between the death and what comes after. But I when I have clients, I just take it where it's at. When I'm in a corporate room, I'm not going to talk quite so much about the religious stuff because not everyone wants to hear that, right?
Yeah, that's not their choice, my friend. Because I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
all about Jesus. Because really, like God is real, and that's our job. We have to tell everybody because yes, the meat suit, you guys, is gonna die 100%.
Yeah.
But like we have to care about what happens in the after, and that's the real death. Not ignoring
Okay.
that life. For me, for the audience, I tell them all the time that is the real death. The real death is not understanding what God sent his son here to do for us. So I do. I get that. I love that. And those corporate guys need to hear it, sir. So let's empower. We're all going to cheer Seth on here today because he's going in that corporate room and he's going to make sure they know
I
that,
appreciate that. Thank you. Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
it,
And I think what you're saying is good, right? We want to speak out of our authentic selves, right? Not just like um walling us off from this or that. So I take that. That's a word of admonishment. Thank you.
we planted the seed, right? That was my daily duty today to plant a seed somewhere. And that's going to be you in the corporate room, like, man, I'm really going to do this today. But Seth, so I tell my audience all the time that like so many people are just sleepwalking through their lives.
Yeah.
So, from your work around this issue, what, like mortality, what wakes people up the fastest?
Yeah, so I often walk people through an exercise, right, where they talk about like what do you want people to say at your funeral, right?
Yeah.
Or if they have a little bit more time, right? Write your own obituary. And everyone listening right now, like take the time, do this. Write your own obituary, right? Because you don't need my fee to know that this is worth doing, right? Because you are in charge of your own life, right? In terms of what you can and cannot do, right? And so you get to write that and then try to live out that goal, right? So if you think of death as something that's like not worth thinking about, right? It's going to happen, so I'm not going to think about it. Well, then you don't have the whole of life in front of you to say this is actually what I want to live for, right? If you keep death out of mind because you're scared about it, well then it's probably worth thinking about like what you actually believe and how you actually want to live, right? And so if Jesus is a part of that, well then what are you going to do about it, right? And if something else like a career change or a relationship change or whatever it is, right? It death can be this defining thing, right? And it will be a defining thing, but it can be this defining thing that doesn't just happen to you, it can happen for you,
Yeah.
right? And so, and again, right, back to God, right? If we think God has some sort of control over things, which, if God is real, I would hope God has some sort of control over things, right? If we think that's true, then somehow our death is more than just something that happens to us. It is something that God can use for us and for those that we are around and for those that love us, right? Death can even be a gift. And that's like hard for us to hear, right? But if we die well and if we die in a way that gives maybe our wealth, maybe our inheritance, but also the beautiful memories, right? That gives like a piece of us that remains with the people that we leave behind, like that's huge, right? And so we don't just live for the day or the work week, or if you're a little bit higher up, the quarterly earnings calls,
Right.
right? Maybe you're a nonprofit and it's like, or church, right? Like we need to take in this much donation money today or this year or whatever it is, right? What's beyond that, our whole life through, and then the impact we have beyond our life, right? And again, back to Jesus, right? If that stuff is real, then the impact goes beyond the day, the week, the month, or even the lifetime.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, since we're in good company with neurospicy brain, I guess my question while you're talking is I'm like, I overthink everything, right? You're
Yeah.
like, write an obituary right away. I'm like, oh my God, that's morbid, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
could I do that? How does that feel? So I want to ask you this. How does the awareness of death, because what's the one thing we're guaranteed in this lifetime? Your meat suit's gonna die.
Yep.
That is a fact. Nobody's hacked that. Okay. Your meat suit is
Yeah.
donezo. It's done.
Yeah.
Uh, so how does that awareness of death change like mental loops or even just anxiety?
Okay. Yeah. Let's start with the neurospicy piece. Right. So I am too, right? And so I try to pray, I try to meditate, and it is tough for me. And I think most of us who, you know, that's a thing. There's the attention deficit, right? And so one of the things that at least the research I've seen shows is that part of that attention deficit is because there's an emotional cue to escape what we're paying attention to because there's some suffering there, right?
Yeah.
And so it's harder for us to pay attention because in some ways we're more sensitive to like those bits of mental pain and anguish that some people maybe it doesn't bother them as much, right? But even just like the neurotypical people, right? There's something about these hard things, including death, that can be hard to stick with. That's why most people don't meditate and pray a lot because it's tough. It's tough for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So sitting with these difficult things, right? And there's also some research that shows that it's not just death, right? Because that might be too big of a bite, especially if you're starting, right? But these hard things that are in front of you, whatever it might be, right? Other kinds of losses, other kinds of change and transition that you don't really want, other kinds of hardships that are coming your way or are in your life now. If you sit with those and you kind of notice, right? You observe without like the judgment, without the running away, without the avoidance,
Yeah.
like little by little. That's a way into more comfort and more presence, not just with yourself, but definitely that,
Yeah.
but also with those hard things that are around you. And right, since we care about relationships, those harder relationships or even the good relationships that have hard bits because they all do, right? Even the best relationships have tension and conflict and all that. And so if you can face your death, right? This is what I talk about. If you can face your death, you can face basically anything, right? Because death is the worst thing,
Yeah.
right? If you can face that, you have enough resilience to face um that project at work or at school or whatever that you're not looking forward to, or that tough move or that tough conversation.
Right. And that, you guys, I mean, my audience knows I push people to step into their potential instead of comfort.
Yeah.
So, how important, like, what role does discomfort play in that leadership growth? Because I do have a lot of entrepreneurs that tune in. I think it's vital,
Yeah.
you know.
I think anytime that there's pain, it's a signal, right? Like pain is God's gift, right? A gift to show us that something is wrong, right? And of course, there's some kind of chronic pain conditions and things like that the signals are misaligned, right? Because we live in a fallen world.
Yeah.
And at its core, though, the pain is a signal. And what is it signaling, right? So if there's some sort of feelings around whatever those hard things are, that people are trying to get through. Um, I think the first thing to do is just to notice it, right? To like in this kind of non-judgmental way, like allow yourself to feel the feelings, right? Because the feelings aren't your enemy. They're the thing trying to tell you what's going on, right? It's your body's way, it's your neurological system's way of telling you that something's up, right? And so if you can't attend to that, you're never gonna overcome it, right? If you can't befriend that part of you that's uncomfortable, you're never gonna break through and like really own your own life in the way that you probably want to. And so, yeah, so just like learning, even if it's not like a full on meditation or prayer practice, just learning to like notice what's happening inside of you in a way that says, oh, I see you discomfort
Mhm.
and you're real and you're there and I don't like it, but you don't define me. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with you being here in the room, being here in my body right now. And
Right.
that's hard for a lot of us, right? Because we want to like power our way through that discomfort, or we want to like avoid it like the plague or whatever it is. But like the world's full of suffering, right? And we're trying as much as possible to avoid it with like pampering ourselves or avoiding the hard things in life. Oh, you doom scrolling, right? TikTok all night, right? And now everyone's all upset because TikTok just got bought out, and so the algorithm's a little funny, and it's like, no, no, my crutch in life, I'm falling down now, right?
First world problems.
First world, yeah, first world problems. And it's funny, right? You talk about that because rates of anxiety, where the world is actually harder, where suffering is actually more real, it's hard to gauge exactly, but it seems like they're lower, right? We are a more anxious culture than people who are actually going through really hard things, right? And now, like you look at us versus generations ago, right, where people were experiencing
Right.
far worse, like living conditions, and like people just weren't as kind in certain ways, of course.
Yeah.
um they were healthier in terms of their mental health, right? They were, maybe not physically healthier, right? They'd die younger,
Been
but they'd be happier on the way there.
yeah, I think physically healthy, everything. That's all of that has changed because of the microwave mentality, because we want that dopamine hit right now. Everybody just wants to feel good right now, and there's no prolonging anything. And I
Yeah.
definitely help my audience work through that because it's the distractions. People are numbing themselves. So, what is the cost of avoiding the hard truths?
Yeah, I mean, well, from my perspective, right, the cost is like you are you're selling your agency, right? You are giving away your power, right? To an algorithm, to a corporate overlord, to whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that you give your time and energy and money to, instead of like really digging in and allowing yourself to feel the hard feelings, to take a little bit longer to do the thing. And again, like for me, I think it comes back to like these practices of noticing, these practices of prayer and meditation. And so even something like this, write your own eulogy or write your own obituary, right? If someone can do that and like really take some time to do that and notice what they're feeling as they do that, like listener, I'm talking to you,
Mhm.
that's a big deal, right? That can open up new things. And it's not necessarily easy things, right? It's probably not. It's probably really hard. But it can open up new things to be like, oh, you know what? I want to be remembered as kind,
Right.
more than wealthy. I want to be remembered as present, more than efficient. Whatever those things are that are coming up for you. And then that's the invitation to do something about it, right? And so it's so like that's what I do with like the coaching stuff, is like I help people figure out how to do that. But at the same time, like I think everyone has within themselves and within their resources, like their circles, and then hopefully within like their relationship with God, they have something to to really get started on that journey, right? Because we all have resources, right? People pay, coaches and shrinks and all kinds of people lots of money. And I'm part of the industry, so like, yeah, keep sending us money. And at the same time, the goal, at least in coaching, is not for you to need me forever, right? The goal is to find the community and the accountability and the structures and systems and practices in your own life to be self-sufficient, or at least to be sufficient in the community that you have, and probably even more of that, right? Because we don't want to live in our own little bubbles. We want to be in community and have those tight knit circles so that we can all help each other. Like I think that's part of Christ's love is we don't just go live in our own little cells. Maybe if you're a monk, but for the rest of us, we're here to help each other and be helped by each other.
It's that human experience. We came here for all of it. And you can't have a human experience without other humans.
Yeah,
That's a fact. But
for sure.
I'm obsessed with, aligning with God's design. So how do you and this is my perspective, is whether or not you believe it, God is real. And what he did for us is real. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere you look. So, how do you personally reconcile faith and that mortality work? And how does it, I mean, how are you able to help people? Because I feel like, listen, I had a coaching business way back and I was way off. I was way off. I was not doing God's work. I was working with the devil and didn't even know it. Okay. Doing
Mhm.
Reiki, doing card readings, like a lot of things that I was like, okay, one day I woke up and God's like, Brandon, burn it all down now. I did. Um,
Yeah.
and so now I'm very, everybody I work with, I make it very clear. I can't help you unless we could build on the foundation of Christ because God is everything. He made you so perfect, so perfect. You have everything in you as you are. It's there. I'm just going to help you see it the way that He sees it, right? Without that foundation, I don't know how to help people because
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here without God. So
Mhm.
how do you work all that through, and what is it
Yeah.
like, the reconciling that faith and mortality with people?
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I think well, let's start here in terms of like the faith and the mortality piece for people who already kind of are on the inside of Christianity and have that relationship, right? So I think for us, like our faith is founded on this idea and this historical reality that like Jesus died, you know. And so part of it is in our culture we're in this like escapist mentality, right? But like Jesus, he died, and the scriptures talk about how he did that for the joy that was set before him, right? He didn't die because it was like fun. He didn't die because
He wasn't
uh
having a great time, you guys.
wasn't having a great time, right? Like the Bible talks about how he sweat drops of blood in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Like that's hardcore stuff, right? That is not light.
Yeah.
And so, if Jesus went through that death, and if our faith is founded in some ways on that death, but also resurrection, of course, but like he had to die before he rose again, right? If that is core to Christian faith, then why do we need to be scared of death? And of course, in our humanity, right, we still are, right? And it's still tough, right? And even Jesus, right, divine Son of God, he also was like, Father, take away this cup from me, right? But not my will, yours be done, you know? So even he was like not interested in dying in like this fun sort of way, right? But he went through it and he faced it like as well as anyone could, right? Better than anyone else, of
He
course,
knew
right?
it was coming.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? Like that, the love for us is so profound to me because how do you do that? How do you
Yeah.
walk through life? If I knew how I was going to die, I don't know if I could ever be as strong as he was. If I knew that they were going to string me up and they were going to do everything they did, like, I don't know if I could be that strong. But that's the point. I may have never written an obituary, right? But I do know the only thing I really fear is I didn't do enough.
Mm,
That's my fear. It's not
yeah.
death. It's like, man, I'm going to face God one day. And did I tell enough people about Jesus? Did I do enough? Did I really step into the potential of who I thought I could be? And that is where I get so obsessed and absolutely emotionally driven to help people get into their potential because I don't know if they know that that fear is valid. That
Yeah.
is something we have to think about. Is like, you're going to meet him and he's going to be like, wow, I gave you all these chances. Not only
Yeah.
just to tell people about me, but to help people, step into the best versions of who they are. That's it. That's our job here. Have a human experience and be the best freaking human you could be. Like it's very simple. And we've made it so we made it so hard and we trap ourselves in this little mental prison. But like at the end of the day, that's you're going to meet your maker and what are you going to say to him?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important, right? And I think that for those people that are in the room who are listening to me talk about this, right? Like my hope is that they'll start thinking beyond it, right? So that death isn't just like the end, right? So that the eulogy isn't the last thing they think about, right? But what does come after. And like I think that for me, like I don't know if it's necessarily my job always to to preach Christ with words, right? But I think it's always my job to preach Christ with love,
Right.
and to not be ashamed, right? Scripture talks about this. Always have a defense ready, And so if someone says, Seth, like this is all well and good, but like what about afterwards? What do you think? Like
Yeah.
that's my lead, And so a lot of times people, they're not going to want to, in the first meeting or even before there's a relationship there, talk about this stuff. And so it's at that point where it's like we have this rapport and we have this trust. And if they ask me, I'm not gonna, be afraid at all to be like, okay, this is what I think, like, and even if I'm afraid, right, like it's still worth doing, right? Because what do we just talk about? Like you face the things that are tough and you do what you need to do or that you want to do.
Scary,
And so
stuff.
right. And so it's funny too, like I have a coach, right? Like we all if you're a good coach, you have a
Yeah.
coach, right? And my coach and I have been talking about how like, yeah, I'm framing this stuff around death, right? But also like what's the next piece in terms of at least one of the scriptures in Romans, right? After death, the judgment, right? So what does it mean to like have this judgment involved in the work that I'm doing, right? So there's of course God's judgment, right? And that comes into play in a kind of more ethereal way. But like the fact that like we are so afraid of others' judgment, right? And what do we do with that? What do I do with that, right? Because I told you I grew up in this household that everything's black and white. And so even though my mind doesn't think that way, like my nervous system still does, right? Because it carries it forward, and that part's not been healed yet, and praise God, someday it will be, but it's not yet, right? I'm still in process. And so like, what do I do with the fact that the world is always judging, and like I'm very sensitive to that, and I'm not the only one, right? Those people in high level positions, they're so afraid of judgment, right? Because they could get kicked off the board, they could get kicked out of the C-suite, the stocks could tank, and then, they'd ruin their jobs, they'd probably still have millions of dollars, right? But they would, oh, what was me, right? And so, and we, like not to make light of that, but like we all carry these fears with us. Whatever these things are, these catastrophic things that we hold on to that, what, maybe that grip of judgment on us is not as big as we think. It's not as tight as we think.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that the death and the judgment, they go together, and in this life and in the next.
Yeah. No, I love that, and that makes a lot of sense. I push ownership pretty hard here.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
does personal responsibility connect to leadership in your work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think personal responsibility is huge, right? Like if you are not holding yourself accountable, right? If you're not taking responsibility in your life, right? Your life's going to go off track. There's no way around that. And for those of us who are neurodivergent, it's harder. Like, let's be honest, it's harder for us, right? Because we do have the squirrel mind, and and like we go off on tangents, right? And I'm here in my house and I'm looking around and it's like, oh, you know what? I need to move that. I need to move this, right? And even in our conversation, right, where I really want to be present with you, there are these distractions, and in the way my mind is made, like just it's a little harder, right? Okay. But at the same time, right, that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. It might be a reason to like take care of ourselves and know our boundaries and limits and all that stuff, right? Very good. We don't want to like guilt people into like changing the world beyond their capacity, right? But we still have great and huge and big and wonderful and loving and joyful capacity, right? And the only way to reach that is with, like you say, responsibility, right? Taking ownership of your own life, because no one else is going to do that, right? Like, yes, like hopefully if you're in the faith, right, like that aligns you with God, right, in a way that propels you towards something greater. And right, even that at the end of the day, or like is a relationship, and it's a list of ideas and things that you should and should not do, right? But it's not going to make you do it,
Right.
right? It might give you the path, but it's not going to take the steps for you. And so I think for me, right, when I think about mortality and when I talk about mortality, it's a way to think courageously about what's next, right? Because that's coming one way or another,
Yeah.
right? And every step you take between now and then, every breath until your last is an opportunity to face the world the way you want to, right? Which includes responsibility. If you really want to live out the values that you have, if you really want to have the priorities in your life that you think you do, right? That's your option. Or, you can just let the world happen to you, and some good things will happen and some bad things will happen, but it'll happen on society's terms. It'll happen on somebody else's terms. If you're in a job, it'll happen on your boss's terms or your company's terms. Or if you're in a relationship, it'll happen on their terms, right? And not yours. And let's be honest, if you're in a relationship, if you're in a job, if you're in a society, the good actors in the world, they want you to do it out of your own volition, out of your own power, out of your own agency. They don't want you just to be automatons. Some people do, right?
Yeah.
But that means they're probably not the right people to be around if you can escape that. You can't always escape that, right? But if you can, be in relationship, be in the workplaces where people really want you to take responsibility, to move forward, to challenge, to be challenged in a way that really takes you to that next step.
Right. That made me think about the fact that you were working with people on hospice.
Yeah.
Could you see a difference in people that were dying that just let life happen to
Oh
them
yeah.
versus
Oh
people? Because
yeah.
I feel like, and I've said it a lot on the show, I've said it so many times that the cemetery is the most expensive place on earth because that's where all the regrets and the dreams and hopes have died from people who had a chance and didn't take them.
Yeah. You can tell that when people are more ready,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've ever met anyone who was like 100% thrilled about it. And that makes sense, right? But you
Well,
can tell when
kind of weird,
people,
you know?
yeah. Yeah, you can tell when people are at peace, right? There's some level of acceptance of what's happening, right? And those are the people who have chosen, whether overtly or not, but they've chosen to be at peace with it. They were the ones who did the action of accepting what was happening, right? And along the way, like it probably was based, I didn't know them their whole lives, but it was probably based on the formation of their character over little choices day by day, week by week, month by month, right? They did not come to the end of life and automatically, for the most part, become people who were at peace, who were living their last days in this generous fashion, right? As much as possible, right? Right, that happened because of how they lived up into those dying days. Like, and so for us who are not dying, I think that's what we want to do. We want to prepare ourselves not just for the last day, but the last month and the last year, right? If like I've some friends who have parents with like severe health issues, right? Who probably are not going to make it out of 2026, right? And and so there's a lot of eye-opening things happening as far as that goes. But those parents, like hopefully they're living their last moments in a way that's generous for the next generation and the next generation after that,
Right.
right? But it's probably too late for them to like really have a shift that's going to be impactful beyond, whatever the memories will be.
Yeah.
But for us, we're not there yet, right? So for those children of the dying, for those of us who are part of those circles, right? Like we get to still choose what our trajectory is, what our trajectory is towards those last days, weeks, and months. And that says a lot about who we are. And hopefully it gives us a North Star, right? So that we can think, what is it that I want to do today
Yeah.
that puts me on that right path? What is it that I need to do today or this week or at whatever time frame? What is it that I need to do to make sure that I become the person that I want to be,
Right.
not just for me, but for the sake of everyone around me when life is short, when my days are numbered.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Um, I know a lot of my listeners struggle with that fear of failure. And I mean,
Yeah.
everybody does. Everybody does. How does remembering that life is finite change that fear, or does it change it?
Yeah, failure's tough, right? Like failure is this teacher that none of us want it to be in the classroom with, right? Like we hate it, nobody wants to fail. Everyone wants to succeed, right? And every breath until the last one is another opportunity, right? There's no failure that needs to stay with you until that dying breath. Obviously, some failures have repercussions, right? Financial, relationship wise, whatever it might be. But that failure doesn't need to define you. You don't need to keep breathing it in, right? Every breath is a gift from God. And so every breath is an opportunity for some sort of, even if it's very small, some sort of fresh start.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I think that failure's there, right? Failure's there. We all fail in some ways, big and small. Like this week, I found out about a failure in this organization that I'm part of, and it's a big one, right? And so like we're having to figure out what to do about it, right? And so just because you have a good idea about how life should be, and just because you have good tools, it doesn't mean that life's not gonna still do what life does, and part of that's failure,
Yeah.
right? But what we do about the failures, how we are in relationship with those failures, like what is our orientation towards those? Like I think
Changes everything.
that's the key, right? And to know that like I said, every breath is a little gift to move beyond whatever that failure said about you.
Yeah. You, I mean, you're working with a bunch of executives. Um, I feel like potential is wasted more than talent. Is that something that you see with your clients?
Oh, what a good question. I haven't thought about it in that way. Potential is wasted more than talent. Yeah. Do you mind defining potential and talent for me so I can think
I mean,
more
like
deeply on
talent
them?
is one thing, like you're just really good at something and it's kind of easy. Like you're talented. There's people that, can start playing the piano and it's a lot easier than if I try to start playing the piano.
Sure.
But I have some potential there because what would happen if I continue to practice every
Got it.
single day? If I continue to show up, how good am I going to be? And can I, so it's the potential of who you can be and how good you can be at something rather
Okay.
than, you know, because you see
Kind of
wasted
that.
talent, right? You see it. You
Yeah.
see people, you see athletes that are incredibly talented, throw their whole life away over drugs or,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it is.
Okay. Thank you for the
Of
clarifier.
course.
Yeah. So, and it's funny you talk about piano. My kids just started piano lessons like a
That,
few weeks ago, and I grew up like as a classical pianist, right? So that one hits home. Um, so let's talk about it, right? So piano, I am musically gifted, right? Probably not some sort of savant, but gifted. And it was awful having to practice again and again and again, right? And it back to the like neurospicy thing, right? For us, for me, right? If it's not interesting, it can be drudgery,
yeah.
right? And that same musical piece over and over and over every day, like that's really tough, right? And it's funny, I'm seeing that in my kids already as they practice, right?
Yeah.
They're speeding things up, they're making it more fun, and they're not good enough to do that yet. And I say, wait till you're good before you become the jazz artist, right? So for potential, right? There's potential there, and there's always potential there. And some people have more, and some people have less.
Yeah.
And there's talent. Everyone has talent in different directions. And so, yeah, I think potential is often wasted because people are not developing themselves. They're not finding the formation that they probably need to move into their full potential. And like potential is kind of a cruel mistress, right? Because there's always more potential, right? And so finding that balance where it's like I'm pursuing my potential, but not in a way that's like ruining me and everyone else around me because I become some sort of tyrant or something, right? And so like there's still that wisdom. And so I think figuring out what potential is for you and me and everyone listening, right? I think there's a lot of wisdom that has to go into that to know like, okay, I probably, So I just turned 40 last year, right? So I have maybe the potential to start doing piano again and join some orchestra or whatever, right? And so I might have that potential. But wisdom probably says now's not the time for that, right? Like in order to do that, would have to practice 10,000 hours or whatever it is. And like, I need to make money because I have kids, right? Like that kind of thing. And so yes, there's potential and we don't want to waste it. And we need to use the wisdom that God has given us to know like potential in which direction, right? And some of that goes back to the talent, right? So if you're really talented at, I don't know, accounting, maybe like build your potential there, right? If you're really talented at public speaking, that's definitely something you can build your talent in and maybe you already have it, right? Like just keep practicing, find a church and lead the Bible study or like go to Toastmasters. Like did that when I was a kid. That was fun. Where you just work on giving speeches all the time, right? But whatever that talent is, that might be an indication of that's how you were fearfully and wonderfully made, and maybe go in those directions, right? And again, it goes back to wisdom. So don't just do this on your own, like with some like I'm going to do this, or like in today's AI time frame, like don't just talk to ChatGPT about what your potential is, right? Like do it in prayer, do it in community, like figure out those around you who already have wisdom, who are a few steps further along the journey, and like ask them like, hey, what do you see in me, or how did you figure out your own path?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would say yeah, there's a lot of potential wasted, and there's a lot of potential wasted in part because people are not choosing the right things to pursue.
Right. I think, I coach people on this all the time, but like finding your potential is really, it's going to be ingrained in your core ethics and your core values and your human experience. And like, what can I do to be the best version of myself to help other people have a great human experience? How can I turn everything that's ever hurt me or that was ever meant to break me, like that thing that happened to you, because we all have a mess. We all have something that we have gone through that felt like death. We lived
Yeah.
through it. We're here, but like, man, it hurts so much, right? It is about taking all of that and just kind of putting it together to say, okay, how can I help someone understand, right? Like my mom signed her rights off on me when I was 12. That is the biggest FU, a rejection in the entire world. I think it's one thing when you're put up for adoption as a baby. It's another thing to grow up with your mom every day and then she's like, I don't want to be your mom anymore.
Yeah.
Huge. And I'm like, how can I what do I do with this? God, what do I do with this? Even as a kid,
Yeah.
you know, you become everything you never had and you help the next person. So your potential is just really those core ethics, those core values. I want people to have that human experience. I am all about like happiness is a choice.
Yes.
It's a choice. And I watch people every day. I watch them and I'm like, you're chasing happiness, you know? Um, it's in you. Like happiness is in you and it is a perspective and is a choice. And I know you talk about that deeper fulfillment. So when you're talking about that, people chasing happiness, the deeper fulfillment, what is the difference? Can you explain your perspective on that for people?
Yeah, I think you're right that happiness is a choice. And happiness in our culture, right? It's even in our founding documents, right? The pursuit of happiness, right? And I think it's okay to pursue happiness. I've heard people say, like, don't pursue happiness, right? But two things. One, you can have it right now, right? And it might be not like the like laughing, joking around kind of happiness,
Yeah.
but it might be the more subtle, like deep-seated joy kind of happiness.
Yeah.
It's there right now, right? Like that's a gift that you can have any moment. And then the other piece, like about pursuing happiness, right? How do you pursue happiness? Like I study philosophy and ancient theology, all this stuff, right? And they at that time they talked about eudaimonia, which is a old Greek word that basically means like kind of full happiness, like not just kind of again not just the happy-go-lucky stuff, but the life that is thriving and flourishing. Like that's the happiness, eudaimonia.
Yeah.
And so how do you get there? And I think a lot of that has to do with like what again the ancients would call virtue, right? Virtue means excellence, right? The excellence of character, the excellence of how you conduct yourself in the world. And so the ancient folks, a lot of them, they would say, like you become happy by living according to your nature, by living according to, as Christians, what we would say, like your calling or like how God made you to be. And so, yeah, I would say like happiness comes when you live according to like what your ethics, what your calling, what you are meant to be doing, right? And again, like knowing exactly what you as an individual are meant to be doing, that's like a lifeline thing, right? But we all know the basics, right? Love people, care about people, like work hard when it's time to work hard, have fun when it's time to have fun, right? Also, a book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, right? For everything, there's a season. Like when it's that season, dive right in. If there's a death in the family, cry your eyeballs out if that's what you need to do, right? If you got a promotion, like go celebrate, right? Whatever's happening, like live it to the extreme, as much as it's safe, obviously, and as much as it's healthy, but like live into it. There's a story about this medieval mystic, right? Christian mystic. And someone like started hating on her because she ate the chicken with too much vigor, right? And she's like, when I'm eating the chicken, I'm gonna eat the chicken.
Yep.
Like, just let me eat the chicken, right? And I think that's a good tale for us, right? Like, if you're eating the chicken, if you're having the burger, right? Or if you're trying to be healthy, if you're eating the salad, right? Right? Eat the salad.
Yeah.
Like just go for it. Like there's nothing wrong with diving into the life
Yep.
that's right in front of you.
I love that. Can you just give us a story, like a testimony, um, of seeing someone completely transform after confronting mortality, and what was the turning point for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll talk about the person who actually gave this idea to me to befriend your death, right? Because it's not just me, and it's a little bit older, right? And the ancient people, ancient Christians even would say memento mori, right? Remember that you will die. But his name's Michael Christensen. He's a retired or semi-retired theologian, and like I can tell that he, as much as anyone I know, has come to terms with his own mortality,
Okay.
right? And you can tell it in the way he lives his life. There's this sense of ease and comfort because he knows that like whatever's going on right now, it might be good, it might be bad, it might be pleasant, it might be awful in terms of our sensory experience, right? But like the way he moves through this world, you can see, I can see this peace and this confidence that comes, from the way he's thought about this, right? Because he's an intellectual guy, right? Professor, but also the way he's lived it in his spirit and in his body, right? Serving people in Africa, praying and meditating, and just like living a life of service and teaching and helping others, right? So I think that is a prime example, right? And from his story, I don't think there was an aha moment, but I think it was a journey to get to this place of comfort with the end.
Yeah, that's awesome. If if you knew you had 5 years left instead of 50, like you knew, just you got your death date right now, what changes? What do you immediately stop tolerating? And then what do you start? What's different about your life?
That's a good coaching question. Good job. I can tell you know how to do this. Um, I would say for me, right, what would I stop tolerating? Um, and it's funny, the first thing that actually comes to mind, like, right, I'm like trying to finish up this PhD in leadership studies where I'm not looking at death so much as retirement, right? The second to last big transition. But I think I would keep doing that. But I would take more time to really think about like that topic. Like, what do I actually want to write about? But I would, in 5 years left, I would finish the dissertation, which definitely says I'm a nerd, right? So there's that. But then the other piece about what would I cut out? Like, I think I would probably tolerate less resentment in my own life, right? Because I think that this idea that there's time left, it allows us to be kind of disgruntled, right? Disgruntled with what's happening in some organization we're part of, disgruntled with our family members or our friends, right? There's like this resent that builds up because we think that something else is going to change or there's enough time to fix it, and maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But if it's 50 years down to 5, like I would try to cut that out of my life even more than I already do
Yeah.
because like the time is short. Like why be full of resent? And not that I'm like super resentful as a person, but
Right.
like even
Fair.
it comes up all the time, right? And that's I'm wired to be a little bit more kind of cantankerous than maybe some other people. And so like how would I change? I think I would change that way. Like just really live again on my own terms, right? Not the resent, because the resent is something that's a little bit more happening to me. But like, hey, I forgive you as much as I can. Like, you're probably not going to change because I know how this goes.
Yeah.
But like, I'm going to see you for who you are and love you anyway. And that could be a person, that could be a system that's kind of messed up, that could be whatever it is.
Yeah. I love that answer. So I want all of you guys, on top of what you're going to take away from him, to ask yourself the same question. If you knew that that was it, and whatever you come up with, that's the next right thing for you to do. That's it. That's the next scary right thing. That's the next focus. Because tomorrow is never promised. It is literally a gift, you know? So, before we wrap up today, Seth, if you could leave our audience, which you just, that was incredible, but if you could leave them with one truth or a practice, like, something tangible that they could start today that would genuinely change how they live, what would that be?
Yeah. I would say if it's like a daily practice, let's do a short daily practice, less than a minute, right? Just focus on your breath, turn off all the screens, focus on your breath. And as you breathe in, right? Breathe in the life, right? The life that God gives you. And as you breathe out, because that's going to be your last act on earth is breathing out. Breathe out all of the death and the darkness and whatever it is you need to let go, right? And always noticing, observing how you're feeling, right? And just notice, just observe, let God do the work. God's right there watching. But breathe in the life, breathe out the death. Because as Christians, right, what do we believe? That after that last breath, you're seeing Jesus face to face.
Exciting. But yeah, I think the meat suit death isn't going to be fun.
Yeah, that means to death.
But how
That
exciting.
doesn't sound very nice, right? But even that, right? Like we have the power, even with like becoming more comfortable with it as we breathe in the life, breathe out the death. Like we have the power to face it with courage, with as much resilience as our meat suit has.
Well, I know this has definitely got me thinking about a million things. So I just am so glad. I'm so glad about this show. Tell everyone where they can connect with you, where they can go to learn from your work, and how to get plugged into all your resources.
Yeah, so right now there's this kind of the more business side of things, right? So a lot on LinkedIn, right? Seth David Clark on LinkedIn. And then my website's under development, but SethDavidClark.com for kind of a whole variety of things, everything from guided prayer to coaching things. And then business site, like if you're watching, it says Life, Death, and Leadership behind me. So lifedeathandleadership.com. And yeah, you can sign up for the newsletter there.
I love that. All right, you guys. If this episode knocked the wind out of you or has you thinking outside of your happy little bubble, okay, share it. Send it to a friend who keeps saying one day, because there is no one day, there is today. And we can prepare for the one day, but our life doesn't center around that one single focus. It's about what happens in between. Please make sure you guys check out Seth's work and his resources. The links are in the show notes, okay? And if you're here because you want to step into your potential or learn how to work with your brain instead of fighting with it and actually move forward with intention, make sure you are subscribed, leave a review, grab the tools on my website, brandonlynette.com. You are not late. You're not broken. Babe, you're right on time. And this is Listen Bitch. I will see you guys on the next episode.